Good evening, primetime partiers. It's primetime party time. Welcome back to our hour of all things media and entertainment, live on the air at 9 p.m. at ptptshow.com and on your time, wherever you stream podcasts. Tonight, we're going to get into a show that everyone loves, but we're not exactly the biggest fans or patrons of. He lives in a pineapple under the sea, and he's just not exactly for me. Yeah, that's right. We are getting into SpongeBob, which for our particular generation was kind of like the gem of Nickelodeon. And most people are gigantic fans of this cartoon, but your hosts are maybe not as beloved as the majority on this one. So we got some voices from our local community to weigh in on SpongeBob and how much they really want to go to bat for or slum a little bit against. But hey, Daniel, how's your week?
Hey, Tracy, and hello, Sean, our guest star today. So we don't end up
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Of course, yeah. We didn't want to end up beating up on SpongeBob alone, and we've had this kind of conversation off air. You've got quite an affinity towards the show. Obviously, we'll get into growing up with the show and what it meant to not. It's great to have you. We've had you in the chat since day one. It's really cool to have you on the show now. With that said, we do what we always do here. Let's start with a toast and a roast on the week, Tracy.
Toast and a roast. My toast kind of feeds into my roast, but toast is Beagle of the show, Chibi, is feeling much better. She had a little bit of a medical scare last week, but just a nice little case of eating too many different foods. So I definitely got roasted by my vet for a little bit for giving her sauteed kale, which I thought was fine. And she was like, yeah, no. And also that everyone else gave her food too. My dad used to throw Fruit Loops and Pringles at her. And this is not a vet advice show, but I will tell you, yeah, it's not exactly on the food for dogs list. Probably doesn't need to be said, but I guess my previous dogs were just straight garbage disposals. Really, stomachs of steel. Like they stole the Christmas chocolates the first 2 years of their lives, and they just kind of ran around like it was not really an issue.
Oh,
like
wow.
They kind of, that was concerning. But they would just be like, man, we love those C's candies. Hate that you guys put them on the higher shelves now. But yeah, that's Matoshi's feeling a lot better. And I also got to see my college best friends this past weekend, my ladies, for the first time, especially one that is on the East Coast normally, and she was able to pop in. So that was really nice. Everybody is vaxxed up, of course. We're not some super spreader social group. So yeah. At least not in that way. And the roast, which does go with my toast, because we're very happy that Chibs is on the mend. However, I will say one way to really just like derail your workday is having your dog vomit multiple times on your shag carpet rug and being like, what do I do? And then you're like, I'll just throw this in the shower, I guess. I guess that's what I do. And then put it on the balcony. I guess what I do. But really, all of the pings go to white noise when you realize there is just this, like, it's almost like that trash pit in Star Wars. And you're like, my house is becoming this. I really have to just switch gears completely. So yeah, if you're somebody who really is maybe too glued to your notifications, that is something that will unglue for a little bit. Maybe not the best way, but you will unplug, because there are consequences to not. So yeah, that is my toast for this week, but mostly a toast to first doggy health scare done and gone.
Chibi's all better now. So.
Yes, should be mentioned that our special guest of the day is the special person of my life. So Sean. So he is also a owner of Chibi. So yes, he is aware of her situation.
Yes, I was aware.
Greatly. So hence why he's been a #1 fan since day one. Daniel, what are your toasts and roasts for this week?
Ooh, okay. So, have either of you two ever watched the series Columbo?
No.
I've heard of it. What's it about?
It's this show that ran from, I want to say, the 70s through like 2003, and didn't produce a whole lot of episodes on its back half, but it's like this like old school series of this bumbling detective whose shtick is that he's essentially just so obtrusive and persistent in an annoying way that he's able to solve all of his cases by basically just being really annoying and sticking it out long enough. I watched recently this episode called Columbo Goes to College, and this was originally going to be a roast because, while the series is a ton of fun, and Columbo is a great character played by Peter Falk, I got into the episode late, and I was like, oh, this rich kid like villain who plays the murderer, his motivation is basically, oh, we could. And not seeing the first half of the episode when he murders his professor, spoiler alerts for this one Columbo episode that came out in 1990, I was just like, wait a minute, like we don't get away with that kind of loose motivation on television. But no, I went back and I looked it up, and it turns out, that it was this professor keeping this, rich on top of the world kid down. And so that kind of did kind of contribute to it. It was a really fun episode. It was really nice to see it like remastered in like a sweet, like, quality. And yeah, Columbo. It's this like odd old series, which most I don't know much about. But this one was fun.
No, I've heard of it, but this is interesting.
Yeah, it's a fun time.
Yeah.
This is one of those weeks where I don't really have much of a roast. I'll get into in a bit something that I've wanted to roast my entire life. But yeah, Sean, did you have anything that you wanted to toast or roast to this week?
I guess I'll toast and roast. So I'll toast the topic we're going to be talking about. Toast the SpongeBob. It's the best. I grew up on it.
Getting it early.
And it's close to my heart. There's some connections there that we can get into. And then for my roast, I'm going to roast a cartoon that I don't like, that I think tries to do what SpongeBob does, but I think SpongeBob does it in a much more tasteful way, is Ren and Stimpy. Like, I do not like Ren and Stimpy.
Oh, okay.
I feel like they're both immature, but SpongeBob just does it way better, in my opinion, than like Ren and Stimpy. So my roast is a cartoon that you could maybe consider similar, but that I don't like. So Ren and Stimpy.
That's good.
That's my roast.
For the first time doing Primetime Party Time, I have just realized Ren and Stimpy and Pinky and the Brain from Animaniacs are different shows.
Yeah.
Really?
And I love Pinky
really
and the
realize
Brain
that.
so much, and I do not care for Ren and Stimpy.
Ren and Stimpy.
So
I guess I like Pinky and the Brain more.
I love Pinky and the Brain.
But I think I would easily take SpongeBob over Pinky and the Brain and Ren and Stimpy.
All right,
Just yeah.
You know what? Let's just start off with those fighting words like right after the break. We're gonna get right into it. So, SpongeBob. So, SpongeBob. Let's get into this whole background. Let's rewind it just a little bit. So, SpongeBob is an animated series, in case you have not seen it before, which I think this episode is a good example of, regardless of how you feel about SpongeBob. You have seen this show. It's very hard to escape. The series creator is and are Steven Hillenburg, Tim Hill, and Nick Jennings. The series description, which, you know what? as much as I am not the biggest proponent of the show, I will give the copywriters for this a little bit of a thumbs up. But the description is the official Nickelodeon website logline is the "Are you ready, kids? Aye, aye, Captain. Don't miss the jellyfishing, bubble blowing, Squidward irking adventures of SpongeBob and Patrick." So, as the cast goes, we have SpongeBob SquarePants, played by Tom Kenny, or voiced by, we should say. Patrick Star, voiced by Bill Fagerbach. Squidward Tentacles, by Roger Bumpass. Mr. Krabs, by Clancy Brown. Plankton, by Mr. Lawrence. Sandy Cheeks, by Carolyn Lawrence. It aired starting from May 1st, 1999, and to present. And the season and episode run currently airing its 13th season, over or more than 277 episodes in total, with a couple movies and apparently a musical as well. I will say, as someone who didn't enjoy the show as much, I think I did enjoy the movie a little bit more. The network, of course, was Nickelodeon, and as of mid-2021 episode recording, the first 6 seasons are available with a Prime Video subscription. We say this because sometimes as we do these film reviews, shows kind of switch platforms based on licensing and media companies, so as of this time, get it on Prime. But we'll check back on that later. So, Daniel, you want to tell us your history about it, and then I can share a little bit because I'm sure mine will be on the same page of it, and then we can just really open it up to Sean, who will go into some more of the pros on that one.
I'll be locked and loaded. So
sweet. This was a series I never let myself like. I like very much was against it as a kid, and I don't know if there was any parental influence on that. I was just like, I did not like this show. I remember not liking anything about it. I remember distinctly trying to get away from it when it was on TV, by any means necessary, which in the early thousands was a very difficult thing to do.
It was very difficult.
Everybody loved SpongeBob. Like you couldn't. Oh yeah.
It's the most popular show on Nick. Like it was everywhere on Nickelodeon. Like it was always on. I remember.
Yeah, that's why I deterred a bit from Nick as a kid, probably. And didn't end up there or back there till quite later. I just like that makes sense. That's why I couldn't get away from this show as hard as I tried. So I did not like SpongeBob. As catchy as the theme was, when I heard that, I was out of the room. And that's my history. Tracy, does that have anything to do with your history?
You know, it's both similar because I know on my own, I didn't like it a lot. I have a feeling some of it has to do with the visuals because I'm not a huge fan of the animation because the faces are kind of like, in my opinion, a little icky. And like, I was used to watching like anime where the faces are very cute, or kind of like when it's more of like a superhero show, they're still kind of more like aesthetic, like they look attractive. And the SpongeBob people are kind of like really like, it's just kind of like a goofier like animation style, which obviously worked. It's on for many seasons, but it didn't super do it for me. I will say that kind of the immature, and I'll be biased here, low bar humor, for my opinion, was definitely not a fan for the parentals. So they were also like, yeah, we don't really want this on. And I'll say the same, that other than I think like the Amanda Show, I didn't really watch like the kids shows on Nickelodeon much at all because it was very dominated by SpongeBob, and I was much more of a Cartoon Network person. I pretty much mostly watched that, and then kind of that like prime time block of Disney shows of like Even Stevens and Lizzie McGuire. And Nickelodeon was always that thing where I'm like, I'll go on Nick at Night and watch like old shows, but not really their centrally produced shows. So that's my history, which I think is more in tune with yours, Daniel. So
And Sean, what were we missing out on?
So I am 3 years older than you guys that might play. So, and Prime SpongeBob is really the seasons 1 through 3. There's like 13 seasons. Really, the seasons after seasons 1 through 3 aren't that good. Like I actually haven't seen the current ones. But my connection to it, and I was not a fan of it at first, but once I gave it a chance, and I think my connection to it is, so Steven Hillenburg, the guy who created it, he went to Humboldt and he was a marine biologist in the Dana Point Harbor. And I remember I would go to the Dana Point Harbor as a kid, and like there would be a sponge there would be a squid there would be a starfish. And I just like the fact that you could tell like the guy who created it was into this goofy humor, but he also combined his interest in like being a marine biologist. So I think it was just kind of, that's what I enjoyed. And then I think obviously it's low bar humor, but I think it falls in the category of low bar humor that's well done. Like Patrick, for example, like Patrick, he's just such a good character. Like he's so stupid, but he's so kind-hearted at the same time. Or same with like SpongeBob, and like he's a total square, like he's SquarePants. Like I think
I can't laugh. It turns me over to the other side. No.
Yeah, like it's in the name. He's a square with SquarePants, and like he's an adult acting like a kid, and I think like in some instances that can lead to a lot of good, but then also leads to problems, which I think is shows in the show. But that was just my experience with it. But like the reason I brought up like Ren and Stimpy in my roast is I think there are a lot of cartoons I can think of that try to emulate or do what SpongeBob does, but they don't do it, and it is like annoying to watch.
Right.
Which I think like you were saying, like, oh, like it was you thought it was kind of annoying to watch at times.
Absolutely. I mean,
but I think SpongeBob does a good job of doing it in like the right way.
Okay. Yeah, I could see that. Maybe this is tough.
It is tough.
It's tough. This is why I wanted to. I thought, see, when we decided to have this talk, I kind of thought it was like an easy, like, all right, like I'm gonna revisit SpongeBob, and I'm gonna, all these memories of like why I just stormed out of the room were gonna come back, as soon as I were to kind of revisit, maybe watch something, maybe hear Tom Kenny's voice, whom I love the work of. Clancy Brown, all of this entire cast is amazing. And I just, was never like, there's all this kind of like, oh, like this character.
So what is it that turned you off by it?
That's maybe the shrillness of it. Maybe maybe I don't. Okay, let's go through this journey. Because I've gone through the journey of trying to find that out this week. And I actually started by having this very conversation with a friend of mine, Mary, who I grew up with. And this is kind of what she had to say about SpongeBob.
Who isn't into SpongeBob?
You don't remember?
Kelsey and I used to quote it in the back seat when we carpooled to school.
Yeah, I was not into that at all. I was like, oh, it's iPod day.
Oh my gosh.
What'd you like about it?
It's just silly, you know? Unfiltered silliness.
Silliness. All right.
Yeah, even now, Kelsey turned 25 and I sent her a text message, what's funnier than 24? 25.
See, like, kid me wants to roll my eyes, but I'm kind of smiling at that right now. I don't know. Ridiculous.
I mean, the other day too, like, we were making in the kitchen, and I was like, oh yeah, I need to put mayonnaise on the shopping list. I'm like, is mayonnaise an instrument? Like, it just, anything you do throughout the day, there's a reference for it.
I think I think that's fair.
That's
But
fair.
I still rolled my eyes. Sean, do you quote SpongeBob?
I can quote SpongeBob all
You
day.
can quote SpongeBob all day.
I
That's what I
could
can't
not
I
do.
can quote
quote.
Patrick all day.
I could
Like
not.
so one this is the one reference I'll bring up. One where Patrick like was the best. So there's one where SpongeBob and Patrick, they're like trying to navigate themselves somewhere and they have a compass and they're supposed to go east and, and Patrick goes east. I thought you said west, like west.
I've heard that one, and I have no response to it.
I also don't have a response to it
But Sean's
because
cracking up.
context is that like Sean will say this as I'm making like a wrong turn
I
on the
will.
Google Maps directions. Like you're going, no, I meant to say go
East?
west. And I'll be
Yeah.
like, Sean, we're in the mountains.
Yeah.
I need an east and west, a left and right. Not a reference from
See,
the
you
show I
guys
don't
even-
like. But yes, it can. We will give the fair point that you can use these references in everyday life, but like the is mayonnaise an instrument? That one almost makes me mad.
Well, yeah.
There's another one where they
I'm like, that's just teaching children incorrect things. Like,
So what I think it is I think you had parents that probably inspired
hopefully
you. to
don't
tell
listen
you-
to the podcast.
Yeah, who told you like who didn't let you watch like that immature kind of stuff because it makes sense because when you see stuff like that, you like act immature as a kid and maybe like
Yeah, they would not have been into that. They very much were like, here, watch some Larry David.
yeah
Make some jokes.
yeah don't like talk like a baby or
Yeah, no.
which you
No.
know
No.
I could see why you don't want your kids to watch that, but like kids love that stuff.
I
Like,
mean,
or at least
it
I
was
did.
silly shows, but silly more like The Simpsons. Unless they're always I think that yeah, there's definitely a family culture that comes into like the cartoons and stuff you like as a kid. And I think mine was always like the family culture is dark humor, so there had to be some darkness in whatever you
Mhm.
were watching. And SpongeBob is, and it can be a pro and a con, a very lighthearted show. It's very warm.
Yeah, I can't.
It's very
think of much
warm tones,
darkness.
even visually,
Yes,
other than
I was
the
just
water.
I was just gonna say, I really like the music too, like all the Hawaiian music, all the ukuleles. Like whenever I watch it, I just think of like Hawaiian shirts and like beach hats, and like I like all that stuff.
It is supposed to kind of chill you out. And
Definitely does.
though I will say one of my like criticisms of this show in comparison to other shows that I liked of that time period, if I'm thinking about like anime shows or even other cartoons, is I wasn't really like a lot of shows almost are like a siren that call you into its world and like the plot really hooks you in. And I never thought like about the SpongeBob world being a place I wanted to learn more about or be in because even though like it was like I understand the creativity aspect because when you know the backstory of it being someone who worked at the harbor and they're like taking all these creatures and kind of making their workplace into this kind of silly show, and in a weird way he kind of was like, this will be like a workplace comedy of mine that is extremely fantasized. And so it's like it's a very daydream show, and there's definitely a place for that. I think for me though, I like to get more into like a universe where there's more happening, because this one was kind of like we're gonna take this like underwater world and make it really like the land world as well. Like they'll be a burger shop, people will take driving lessons, and go to do kind of like very everyday things. So, which I think could be a hook for a lot of people. Like, yeah, exactly. That's why I love that. But for me, I was like, if you're gonna make a fictional world, like we gotta go deep. There needs to be like backstory. There needs to be things that hook into each other. Like who's getting brainwashed? I don't get it. But that is more my taste.
Mm-hmm.
So, who else do we have to weigh in?
Right.
on SpongeBob.
So another person that I went to this week is when I say that I was trying to escape SpongeBob, and when you say that it's such a light show, I had an aunt who would put it on all of the time, whenever I was around. Yeah, and I visited this aunt often.
Cue widened eyeballs.
Yes. And so I saw my aunt Debbie this week, and I asked her why SpongeBob? Why was she so into SpongeBob? 'Cause she was into SpongeBob in the way that other kids on the playground were into SpongeBob. And this is what she had to say.
It's for all ages because I am 65 and my little great niece is 10 and we both like SquarePants. It's for all.
Now, so following that, I tried to reach out to her great niece, my 10-year-old cousin. She declined to comment for the show. But we did actually get something from the other side of SpongeBob, something more akin to our growing up of it. This is pretty much series regular, Just the Facts, weighing in with her thoughts on the matter.
Hi, Primetime Party Time. I heard about this week's episode topic. So my thoughts. SpongeBob is just okay. And I know that could be a bit unusual because I know SpongeBob has a lot of fans. I've seen the piñatas and all the lunchboxes and backpacks and the memes. So obviously a lot of people love SpongeBob and they get a lot out of it. But I didn't always see what the hype was all about. Sometimes I thought SpongeBob was a bit extra. Why does Sandy the squirrel live underwater? I'm not sure, but she does. And I will admit she seems to enjoy it. But I guess as long as you don't take that stuff too seriously, you can really like the show.
So if I could add, I kind of liked how Sandy the squirrel, the whole dynamic was. I liked how she was a female character and there wasn't really any like romantic aspect to it at all. And they the stuff they did was so weird. Like they'd play karate, they're almost like stunt buddies, like Sandy and SpongeBob, and it was just such a that dynamic you don't really see in a lot of cartoons.
I'll give you that. I think it brings up a good point in Just the Facts, in how she's kind of illuminating that if you're not someone who really is overthinking points of the show, that stuff won't bother you. I think that's the same thing I was getting into with the universe of you kind of go into the well, why is this person here and what are they doing with that? But if you just kind of go no, the whole point is they're having fun.
Just stupid.
You don't really need to pay attention that much to those details, but if you get a lot of joy out of the details all coming together from a writing perspective, then you are kind of frustrated. You're you can't just drop things in and have them not lead up to something bigger later. But I think that is kind of part of this show's, if you're kind of gonna bat for the positive side, you're kind of supposed to check out a little bit and just laugh. And it's not as much of a thinking about these details. I think for me, though, that is still the thing of I like the shows that create another world for me. And this is still kind of in that same mindset of it being kind of, and I think, the overhype does play into stuff a lot. Because I think if you liked a lot of other cartoons that perhaps did not have the same hype, you were kind of why is this show so popular and other ones not?
Maybe that you might have just described why I could never get into it. I spent so long as a kid. It's funny because we've got we're pretty evenly matched with people on either side of the fence tonight, but it wasn't like that, Pac.
No.
You couldn't publicly hate. I kept it a secret. I would distract myself at my aunt's house. I always kind of thought that we'd all kind of come around to, oh yes, SpongeBob. Yeah, it was this quirky little dumb thing we all liked. And and it never really came that way. History is written with sweet, sweet victory, and SpongeBob SquarePants has now spanned generations. My 10-year-old cousin loves the show. I'm still buying Christmas presents based in SpongeBob. I feel I don't even
You're
know.
still investing in the franchise. You're not necessarily into.
Yeah, now that I think about it, it was a cartoon, like unlike a lot of the other cartoons, in that there really wasn't like a point to a lot of things they did in it, versus other cartoons you watch. Like there's connection in what's going on, and SpongeBob is just, yeah, it was just completely random, but like that's just what I enjoyed. I just enjoyed relaxing and laughing at it and not overthinking it.
Well, and a lot of sitcoms from earlier days are kind of like that too. It is supposed to kind of just be like a ha ha laugh track. Like, you know, the season finales don't really say anything big about the show. They're just supposed to be like enjoying each episode as like a little treat, and they're not doing these like series long plot lines and other things like that. And it definitely seems to more mirror that style instead of the kind of, even if you're looking at shows that aren't really that serious, but just take like a Powerpuff Girls, where like they have a villain and they're like actively working towards different things in the season.
I would
But
take Bikini Bottom over Townsville, though.
Would
Oh,
you?
Way better name than
disagree.
Townsville.
I don't know.
Townsville is
Ooh.
hilarious. It's
Townsville's
just like
good.
a not name name.
Townsville. That's
Yeah,
a
it's
lazy naming of towns.
no, it's supposed to
Townsville.
be funny because it's like we're not even gonna name this. We're gonna name it like two things. It's kind of like that joke in Mr. Deeds where the Winona Ryder's character makes up the town name and she's like, I'm in Winchesterton Fieldsville. And it's just taking like a bunch of
Townsville.
really random names that sound like they should exist. So yeah, I like Townsville. I like Powerpuff Girls or even like Dexter's Laboratory. Like there were things that they kind of actively worked towards, even if they didn't have like big plots. I just
Yeah.
they had more drive. So I think like for me too, that was like the thing about SpongeBob. I was like, what are they trying to do? And really like they're just trying to enjoy life. But I'm like, I don't know if I'm that chill, even as a child.
That's kind of, yeah, that's exactly where I was at. We had a comment in the chat. Fen says a lot of the overhype killed SpongeBob for her as well. This kind of gets me to a point where I want to bring in something that was also provided for us as far as thoughts on SpongeBob that kind of harken to a couple of Sean's points. This is from Carol in New York, who kind of messaged us in. She's not a traditional fan of the show, but she's found some love for SpongeBob in other mediums.
My name is Carol. I have never watched actual SpongeBob. I've just seen the musical 2 times. So I don't really know anything about what the actual plot of the cartoon is, but I'm going to hope/surmise it's pretty close to the musical because that's what I'm going to be talking off of. As I said, I never watched the cartoon, so there's a couple things I'm not totally clear on. Like, for example, SpongeBob dresses like an adult and has a job, but it's definitely very childlike and a little naive. And I mean, I think that's part of the appeal of the show, is that it's all very childlike and simple and wondrous and innocent for the most part. Like, Patrick and SpongeBob are probably two of the most naive, innocent people in this entire town. I think I understand why people like this show. I mean, I think I'd find it hard to understand why you wouldn't like the show. I could get how you could be ambivalent about it, but how do you dislike just a simple children's show? It's sort of like, it's not really trying to take a hard tack or a hard theme like The Simpsons might be, or like, South Park was. It's just a children's show about two male friends, which is also pretty rare to see, who are best friends forever. They're dealing with the daily ins and outs of life. They have some like semi-annoying nemesis like Squidward, and they have like some bigger enemies like Plankton. But other than that, it's pretty simple and naive, and I think that's part of the joy of it. But it doesn't feel like there's enough there to actively dislike it unless you just really hate quirky things or something like that. I could see how you could hate what the internet has done with it, because SpongeBob has become a ton of memes, but I feel like that's a little separate.
And it's true. That's where I feel like I can't. I'm surprised I can't escape it. SpongeBob's like the most memed show. Like it's
It
been
is.
memed way before
And
The Office was even on people's radars for the meme world or whatever.
it's another thing that upsets me because I'll like really want a meme from a show I liked and it's not popular enough to be memed, but then they'll be like every scene from SpongeBob has its own meme and I'm like
Yeah.
and I'm like
There was
rage.
when there were also, I remember there were when Steven Hillenburg passed away, the creator. I saw some SpongeBob memes that I thought were pretty well done.
Well, that's nice.
Hit us with
in
the
a
pathos.
commemorative way.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah, I thought there were some good commemorative memes.
That is nice.
But like, don't make us feel bad for
those were not the memes I
bringing
saw.
it to that direction. This is not to you know, disrespect someone's memory. This is just to talk about SpongeBob.
Absolutely not.
All right.
I will say, what Carol had to say about the series, and I disliked SpongeBob as a kid, so I don't feel like I fall into disliking it as an adult. I disliked the kid show as a kid. And I felt that I owed it to everybody basically arguing in the opposite direction that I had to go watch an episode of SpongeBob.
So which episodes have you seen?
Well, overall, I've seen plenty throughout my life. But the one that I watched today was the original first episode of the series ever aired. Which actually was far more of a like set up the world episode and like bring SpongeBob into the universe of the show than I figured it would be. It created all the status quos. It's actually like a first episode. He meets Sandy. He gets his job at the Krabby Patty. It was interesting how much of an introduction it was.
Yeah, there's was that the one where he like goes to see Sandy and he can't and there's no water and
it's exactly the one.
Dehydrated and
and Patrick's trying to tell him to stick it out.
See, you're laughing. Did you enjoy it or?
So I did, and here's the thing. I want to get back to Carol because Carol speaks on some things that she noticed about the musical that I feel like were paralleled in this first episode. So here's what she had to say about her experience watching the musical.
I think a lot of the appeal of SpongeBob being turned into a musical is that it's about breaking past the limitations that other people place on you or that you might place on yourself. People don't want to believe Sandy Squirrel because she's a land mammal, but she's a scientist and smarter than all of them. The main one, of course, is that SpongeBob is told that he's just a simple sponge and so he can't be manager. Kind of the same way that he always seems to have ambitions in the show but he never quite seems to achieve them is my sense of it. Squidward in this, you know, he's I think a much more annoying character in the cartoon, but in this he's insufferable, but he's basically like insecurity personified. He has a song called I'm Not a Loser, and it goes into like multiple double negatives of why he doesn't want to be as down as people tell him he should be. So there's so much of this that like appeals really to Broadway, that appeals really I think to people of all ages.
And that's what I saw in this episode. I saw actual themes. I saw SpongeBob's overall attitude towards life meaning something and like
that. So that is definitely something I like about SpongeBob is so Squidward is like this curmudgeon who's always negative, and their lives are very similar in a lot of ways. Like they're both fry cooks, they both work at the Krusty Krab, and you know SpongeBob just like totally embraces life and is positive and he's funny and he enjoys Patrick and Sandy, and I think it's just kind of like. It's a representation about what your outlook can be. Like you could be Squidward, you could be this negative Nancy, you know, not enjoy your job, not enjoy your situation, or you could be SpongeBob and just enjoy life.
Exactly. Yeah. And so SpongeBob fumbles through getting a job at the Krabby Patty, all while his biggest, like the biggest obstacle in his way isn't all of the like mischief happening that's like basically like throwing the Krabby Patty out of whack, right? It's Squidward trying to convince Mr. Krabs that SpongeBob shouldn't work there.
Yeah. I do wonder if you didn't like this as a kid because you were more into like like fantastical, kind of like unrealistic things, if this show would appeal to you more as an adult in the workplace. 'Cause some of that does seem like themes of just, if you're kind of just like getting started somewhere and you don't really know what you're doing, you could kind of like have some more kinship to the character who's like, I'm just trying. And then there's like the curmudgeon of like the Squidward who's been there for a while that's like, you just keep making mistakes. And it's kind of that thing of eventually he figures himself out, but he didn't let all of those things get him down in the way that like the Squidward character would. And I will give the positive note that like you can't find a ton of shows like Carol said that are promoting like two guys having a friendship, and there's that, but also kind of being more soft characters that talk about a lot of their feelings and are very kind of like emotionally open. I think that
Yeah.
is something that they do on that show that I will give them the thumbs up on. It's not one where it's only kind of being like a action show where it's like a lot of violent portrayal or being like machismo. This is one where it's like you could, always hang out with your buddies and talk about your life and, be silly and goofy and dance around together. You don't always have to be, you know, the tough dude. So I think there's some tropes there that they kind of just make everyone like a very like neutral character. And that's kind of nice too, of just kind of not playing into so many like kind of societal things. And that's kind of also what she's talking about, like the Sandy as coming in as the outsider, which is
Mhm.
you do wonder why she's in like the astronaut suit for being underwater. You're like, they have scuba gear, but I guess at least she stays dry that way. But I think those are the notes where like the details of even as a kid, I was like, I just don't get though why the squirrel is like this. Why are they doing that? But yeah, I think there is definitely some light and good themes about it not taking itself too seriously and trying to kind of push that theme out there. And if you're arriving as like the underdog that, you can just not let the other people get to you. I think that's a nice note. I mean, I think for me, I can't be converted on the writing.
Yeah.
It's just not for me.
Right.
It's more cartoon driven, I would say, than the writing. Like I feel like it's definitely like I would consider like the people on SpongeBob, whether you like it or not, it's very cartoon driven versus like South Park, for example. Like those guys aren't cartoonists, and it's more about the story.
Mm,
And
but but I don't feel like the animation of SpongeBob really progressed as the show went on. So I agree with this.
I enjoy the animation in
Okay, but
SpongeBob.
I guess the animation wasn't for me, so it's hard for me to go like, were the visuals the bigger part of this show? But like, I do know what you mean by that, where it's like the South Park creators are really like putting 110% into the writing, and the SpongeBob creators are probably doing a more of like a, you know, a different kind of split of how
Mhm.
much they put into animation and how much they put into writing. I'm sure they still put a lot into writing. It's just like not writing that really like even like some of the punchlines that are on memes, like they really just don't make me laugh. But they bring so much humor and joy to other people that I know it's that thing where it's like it lands with others. But yeah, I think it's just it's interesting that one of the recordings is talking about quirky because I'm like, I love a lot of quirky shows. Like I really like Bob's Burgers, it's very quirky, like New Girl, like
Yeah.
that is stuff that I really like, but this is the one maybe just kind of the odd one out that is like not the quirk of my choice.
Mhm.
And I wonder what that is.
Yeah. I mean, there's this kind of like it it's looking at it quirky now and looking at it quirky then are two different things, right?
That's very true.
I can't argue with a lot of like the emotional core here of what Sean's been talking about, of what Carol's talked about.
Yeah.
Those kind of things, like those characters, those themes, those journey, like I have to love all that stuff. And yes, I remember the day at my first retail job where I was stacking little gummy Krabby Patties, and I was like, "Oh my god, stacking little gummy Krabby Patties!" But I think I'm with you, Tracy. I think that it's like there was something early on for me with that kind of like how it was all presented, where maybe it is just like the tone or even the volume or something where I was just kind of like, wait a minute, like what's going on here? But yeah, I don't know. It's like every time I look at it, like SpongeBob's attitude is something kind of to admire. And it is kind of fun that he's dressed all preppy, and yet at the same time, he's so childish. And I noticed today that like, oh my god, like Patrick's just like bumming it in board shorts, and that's kind of hilarious too. And Plankton versus Mr. Krabs like business rivalry is hilarious, and they're both driven by this like greed, right? Or Plankton seems to be driven by the most dark things in the show. All that stuff's fun.
It's weird thinking about this show in an adult context of like the people who aren't taking themselves too seriously versus the people who take themselves too seriously, and the like the smallest organism of the ocean being the most evil.
It's great.
The one that can be eaten by everything is just like this, evil genius mastermind, but doesn't really ever get up to anything. Or that Mr. Krabs kind of looks like, similar to like Sebastian in The Little Mermaid, but he's just like also very like kind of like stout.
I've always thought he was
like stressed out. So I feel like there's like interesting things you'll notice as an adult looking at this as these themes of like kind of like narcissism, and almost like, with SpongeBob, you kind of, and Patrick, you definitely get the idea that they're not overly ambitious in their everyday, but they're also, because of that, they're not being let down all the time. And it's interesting to think about the writers and what their mindset must have been about that, of like showing kind of people who don't feel like they need to always be like getting the most out of everything, and they're just like happy with what they have. Like in a way, if you were to really overanalyze it, and this is probably a stretch, it's like not in that very capitalistic mindset. Like they're very kind of like ones that are just like, we just want to like have fun. We don't really care about moving up any sort of ladder. We just want to like live in our little, houses that are right next to each other and go have, shenanigans and watch TV at each other's houses. Whereas like the other characters on the show are trying to do those things and are very unhappy. Right. So like you look like the Squidward character is just like wanting to do, kind of is the more ambitious character, but he's always upset because he's not really ever moving up. Or not.
Or Mr. Krabs.
Or Mr. Krabs, he's the manager, he's the boss, and he's never happy. And you're kind of looking at this on, what kind of message are they wanting to send? Like, kind of like being in charge and being on the top does not equate happiness, which, there's some truth in there too. But yeah, I also can see that if you're looking at like the creators and stuff, and like, maybe they also grew up in the Dana Point, very surfery area, kind of trying to be more like chill, and seeing also the kind of contrast of being in an area that's like really like financially driven, where there are the people who are quite the opposite, and having that kind of culture clash in your community and wanting to create that in a show is also kind of an interesting thing you notice that you would not notice as a kid, because you don't know any of those things. You're not like, are these characters really falling into the everyday societal construct of how they are driven by finances? No.
It's hilarious, because that's more of a conversation than I ever thought I'd have in my life about SpongeBob.
But if
Sean were to just rapid fire his favorite quotes at us, I'd still sit there straight face. Maybe not. I don't know. He seems to, like there's such an affinity.
The Salty Spittoon episode, prime. I bet I could pick out 5 episodes that you guys would really like because there's a lot.
I'd love you to. I will accept that challenge.
We'll accept the challenge, but if you have some quotes, what are some like?
So my favorite quote from SpongeBob is when he wants to go into the Salty Spittoon, and then they're like, "Oh, I think you belong over there," and it's a place called Weenie Hut Juniors, and basically he like breaks his knuckle, so he starts crying, and then he goes into Weenie Hut Juniors, and there's all these like nerdy guys in Weenie Hut Juniors, and he's just kind of embarrassed to be in there. But that's a good episode.
It's interesting because it's almost kind of playing into these like bigger themes of like, why was he kicked out of one and then put in the place with all of the other dorks? It almost seems like it's supposed to be like the kind of like click mindset.
Yeah, and then there's also Super Weenie Hut Juniors. So
the only reason I'm smiling is because it's your affinity towards it's so contagious. But I'm sitting.
I'm just like the way they animate Weenie Hut Juniors. I love the animation for how it looks in Weenie Hut Juniors.
Okay.
And how the Salty Spittoon looks like that. Those would be quirky examples of where I really like the animation. So Weenie Hut Juniors. It's just like a little. So it's like a cupcake. It's like a little cupcake building, and then it has a weenie on it with a, those like hats with the little helicopter on them. Yeah. And then it's just like a weenie, just like waving his hand. And
that is funny.
And then there's Super Weenie Hut Juniors, and it has like bunnies and like hearts and rainbows.
And what does the Salty Spittoon have?
And then the Salty Spittoon, it's basically just like this beat down building that all the tough guys go into, and SpongeBob can't get in.
Is it supposed to be like bars, kind of?
It could be seen as a bar.
Like that's supposed to be like a dive bar, and then these other bars.
It's maybe a dive bar like
or approachable bars, I guess.
I don't know. Maybe that he's a kid and he can't get into the bar, and he has to go to like the ice cream parlor or something.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I just think like when I hear SpongeBob say Weenie Hut Juniors and it shows Weenie Hut Juniors, and like when he goes in, like it's just really funny to me.
There is this a little bit like, I feel like a lot of people who love this show, it's interesting because like for Daniel and I, we were immediately put off for somewhat of a thing we can't exactly put our finger on. It also seems to be the opposite for people who love this show. They can't exactly put their finger on like, this is the thing that really sold me on it. They were just kind of pulled in and mesmerized by it. So it is an interesting thing that this show kind of has this force. And you're either like sucked in or you're immediately
there's also like this other scene where Plankton has like 2 ice cream cones and he's crying, and SpongeBob's like, Plankton, why are you crying? And Plankton's like, oh, I have these 2 ice cream cones, but I only need 1. And SpongeBob's like, wait, I'll eat those ice cream cones for you. And like, I don't know, like that sounds so boring when I explain it, but just the way they do it is just really funny to me.
I've seen that scene. I liked your description. It's so funny because it's like when you describe it, you love it. And I take that and I smile.
He's just so excited to get 2 ice cream cones, and I don't know. It's so base. It's like so base.
It's a lot of the little things.
Yeah.
I love that. It's either it has something, and you've either always just kind of like had it with it, or you just like don't speak the language of SpongeBob. Maybe.
Yeah. It's definitely one of those like. I could see myself watching a SpongeBob episode with you guys, and there would be all these scenes like the 2 ice cream cones where I'd be like, oh, that's so funny, and then I'd like look over and you guys would just probably just be like blank stare, and I'd be like cracking up.
I don't know though, because if you were enjoying it so much, I would probably feel like happy that you're just loving
Gosh.
television so much.
Yeah.
I feel like that would bring me joy in a way that I don't know if I would. I think, but the other thing is, if you told me to watch it on my own, I probably wouldn't do it. I'll be honest. I don't know if I
Yeah.
would. I would, but I wouldn't be really excited to do it. But if I watched it with you, I'd be like, I could watch it with someone who really likes it and see what's the thing that, really sparks the
Yeah. There's
that is great.
I can think of I can think of so many scenes like that. Like there's one where they're really into this conch, like this shell, and they always scream about like the magic conch. And
It's very Lord of the Flies of them.
Yeah.
Say so.
I don't know. I'll pick some episodes we can watch. Maybe.
Yeah, we'll follow up with that. I think we deserve some homework on that. I won't
feel like
just roast
I feel
something.
like me explaining it
not
like
give it a
doesn't do
chance.
it justice.
I think it does. I think a lot of what you're saying is echoing what a lot of the other people who've chimed in have said too. Like there's just these kind of like very sweet moments that people really liked. I have to say, like, I think I'm someone where if the show has too many sweet moments, I drift away. A lot of times, like that, I'll be like,
they're not even sweet moments because there are so many cartoons I can think of that like get me emotional, and like, especially if it's like a cartoon about like childhood, but it doesn't really happen. Like, I don't get like emotional watching.
Not
SpongeBob. It's
emotional,
more just pleasant.
But that's what I mean. Like it's very positive. Like there's not a lot of, and the negativity is really like negatively portrayed, if in a way. Whereas like I think like for me, I like shows that are like kind of a mix. So when it's like like I will watch drama sometimes that kind of like, more skew towards the negative side. But then like I also really like comedy, but I like ones that kind of have a dark and light balance. I think for me, SpongeBob is like, driving on the freeway after daylight savings right before sunset and you're just blinded. Like that is, it's that positive. And I am more just like, I can't say I am not, I am, even as like a 7-year-old, I think I would watch it and go just like, well, this isn't how I feel. I am not always this stoked on life, which, take that or leave that. It would be good to be as stoked on life as SpongeBob is. But I think that's the other thing too. You don't get a large range of emotions from these characters. Like it is very like, I mean, they're very happy and they do have like these touchy feely moments, but I don't think you really see like the large range of
it's pretty one-sided. It's pretty one-sided show.
Yeah. And I think like even if I think of shows I really liked as a kid, they did kind of go through the whole spectrum or have like commentary on that, because that's like Sailor Moon is very goofy as well, but like they had a lot of like, this character has like all of these, like this one's a crybaby sometimes and the other people kind of call them out on it, but there's like, there's never kind of like that kind of like dialogue or rapport. It was a little bit more silly, very, very silly. And I think I like heartwarming shows kind of like Schitt's Creek, where like there's still like this kind of like edgy humor, even though it's a very sweet show with lots of sweet moments. And also the writing on it is like, whew. But that's to be saved for an episode in the future. But that's like, I think that's for me, like if it's gonna be a really sweet show, it also has to have like kind of the peaks and valleys of how they get to those points. And for these like kind of stayed, I don't want to say like one dimensional, but like it is more in one space.
It is like, pretty one dimensional.
Like a character is either a positive character or a negative character. You're either a Squidward or a SpongeBob. Like they don't get to be both. And I think for me, like, I prefer shows where the characters get to be happy-go-lucky sometimes, negative other times, and kind of have that growth. Whereas, like, I would make this claim without watching the show that if you put on the 13th season, you're not seeing a lot of character change from the first season. And someone in the chat can correct me if I'm wrong, because I could be very wrong. But, and maybe some people like that consistency. Like, it's comforting to see something that just like it is what it's telling you to be, and it's not going to like evolve and change for better or for worse.
Imagine if like 10-year-olds now who wanted to watch SpongeBob had like 7 seasons worth of character development to catch up on, though.
Is that a ridiculous claim I have?
I just think it's funny.
It kind of is.
I think it is. I think it's the consistency, honestly, that kind of keeps it. I'm amazed. I think we've talked about it before. It's like anything that can last a certain number of seasons and continue its core sort of dynamic, and continue like SpongeBob and Patrick getting into the new antics week over week. Is quite a feat.
No, anybody who can have a show go on as long as they have are doing something right. And it's
the most popular show out of Nickelodeon by far.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Do we have a stat for that?
I don't know the specific stats, but it definitely is the #1 Nickelodeon show.
I could buy that.
Based on its longevity and
based on the merchandise
all the merchandise.
That is true. Let's see. I'm going to go on Best Nickelodeon Original Shows. Ranker does say SpongeBob is #1, closely followed by Rugrats, and then followed after by the Fairly Odd Parents, and then Drake and Josh, and then iCarly, and then Hey Arnold. I have to say, to correct myself on not watching Nickelodeon shows, I did watch Hey Arnold.
Love Hey Arnold.
Which could not be a more different toned show.
Absolutely.
Yes. Much more layered show. Or
much more like almost sad.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. I liked the Wild Thornberries.
Yes.
I like the Wild Thornberries.
I liked As Told by Ginger.
Didn't watch
I liked As Told by Ginger. It wasn't on for very long.
That is a show that was like maybe one season. I really liked the intro song because it sounded similar to like Nora Jones or something, or maybe like a Macy Gray vibe. It was something like that. Oh, and obviously Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Avatar.
God, that should be #1. See, I think that's like kind of.
I like that show more than SpongeBob. Like that show to me.
Oh, and Doug. Okay.
I like Doug. I like Hey Arnold more though.
Oh, and Danny Phantom. I remember
Danny
that
Phantom.
show.
Like Danny Phantom.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Oh, and Rocket Power. Wow. I really just like forgot a lot of Nickelodeon shows. And Zoe 101. Fun fact about that show is that like Kathy Griffin made like a really controversial joke. That's not controversial. That's expected. But I remember in one of her stand-ups, she said it was written by like someone who was like a top writer on Zoe 101, and I was like, it's hilarious. I love fun facts like that. The Amanda Show. Ren and Stimpy comes at 24. So if you're looking at the range, SpongeBob #1, 23 shows in between, according to this.
Well, I did toast SpongeBob, and then I roasted Ren and Stimpy, and Ren and Stimpy is pretty low on the.
The internet agrees with you, Sean.
Yeah.
They are on your side.
People have said it. SpongeBob is reigning royalty for Nickelodeon. Generations now. Maybe. I don't know. 22 years? But it's a while. We even got a message from Alexandra, who writes in, I think I love it so much now because I grew up watching it, so the episodes and references became a part of my life. If I were to watch it today for the first time, I probably wouldn't like it as much. So it brings back memories, and it's something me and my brother bond over. Any final thoughts on SpongeBob? Any final parting words we'd like to say?
As much as you could like or dislike this show, you know the lyrics to most of the songs, like the Friends
That's true.
song,
F
the
is for friends.
Friends that do stuff together.
U is for you and me.
And it's for
It's for
anything,
anywhere and anytime.
anytime at
Oh,
all,
here
here
in
in the deep blue sea. Yeah, like I don't even like the show,
And then
but I
Plankton
know
goes,
that
F is for fire that burns down Bikini Bottom.
U is for uranium.
Uranium. Bombs.
And is for no survivors.
See?
Yeah, again, how
Yeah.
do I know the words to this without even
Yeah,
being
I feel like you haven't even seen
much of it?
much of
No.
it. So
No. But yeah, whoever's writing the music for SpongeBob, I'll give them a toast for that. The songs are like earworms.
they have
really
a
stick with you.
Christmas song too that's super good. They're just great. It's great.
So you know what? I have to say, Sean, you did a good job for two people who are very, very on the other side of this show. I wouldn't say you've converted us to SquarePantsism,
I think you have
but
a better understanding.
we are
so.
giving it, I would say, a lot more. There's some more positives about the show than I thought I would realize out loud. So, you know, I'll give you that.
Well, I'm glad I could convert you guys, and now that you guys love SpongeBob.
I like they're like, so you said you weren't, but you'll see after the 5 episodes we watched together.
Yeah, I could.
You'll be on the side of the sponge.
Mm-hmm.
And on that note,
If anything,
let's play it out.
If anything, I have made peace with my 10-year-old self. That's it for the 22nd episode of Primetime Party Time. Thank you for joining us. The show could not have been made without the following amazing people. We're talking our artwork was done by Fen. Find her at FenLatte on Instagram. Our theme song was done by JWright. Find him at jwrightmusic.com. Our website done in thanks to Coco. Production managers BMAG. Just the Facts, also known as Wendy, produced some of our testimonials tonight. They were featuring Carol from New York, Mary, Debbie. All fantastic tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And of course, thank you to our guest star, Sean, for coming on tonight.
Thanks for coming on
for
the
having me,
air.
guys. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I'm feeling 22 episodes of PTPT.
And you can find all of our episodes of Primetime Party Time on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you like to listen to our podcast. If you want to rant, roast, or rave with us, you can hit us up by sending us an email at info@ptptshow.com via our voicemail or chat box on the ptptshow.com homepage. And catch the next Primetime Party Time actually on June 14th, 2021, live at 9 p.m. Pacific here on ptptshow.com.
And here we are at the end of episode 22.
All right.
Thanks for joining, Sean.
Of course. That was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.